So let's begin with the history of the growth of Islam in the United States. Between the years 1878 and 1924, Muslim immigrants from the Middle East, more specifically Syria and Lebanon, they started arriving in places like Ohio, Michigan, as well as North Dakota and South Dakota. So like most people that immigrate to America, they were just seeking, better jobs, better work opportunities than what they had in their homeland. And history shows that one of the biggest employers of Muslim migrants was the Ford Company. So there was a lot of manual labor work for them to do. They were able to make American dollars, send it back home to support their family members, as well as build a life for themselves in America. At the same time, there was a great migration of blacks to the north, and this helped the African American Islam revival and the growth of the African American Muslim nationalist movement that of course is still alive and existing today. And this movement hopes to restore the faith and the culture that was destroyed during the slave era. During the 1930s and 1940s in America, Middle Eastern Muslims, when they started moving in, they started gathering together into small communities and setting up mosques to go and worship. However, African American Muslims already had their own mosques set up. They were doing their worship practices. So that continued for some time. Islam started to grow a little bit by bit, and an entirely new group of Muslims came from places such as Palestine. And several years before that, many Palestinians migrated to the United States. This was after the establishment of Israel. Also, immigrants from Iraq and Egypt started migrating to America. And in the 1960s, we saw a massive wave of Southeast Asian Muslims also coming to America. And Muslims also came from Africa, other parts of Asia, as well as Latin America. Okay, so that was a little bit of history of how the growth of Islam really started picking up in the United States. So let's fast forward it now to present day. Now I'm sure we're aware of the many different debates about immigrants in the United States, especially when it comes to immigrants from Muslim countries. But to really find out the amount of Muslims that live in the United States is a pretty difficult question to answer. Even though it may seem simple to answer, just any statistics anyways, it's always based on an estimate. But on top of that, the US Census Bureau collects statistics for housing, population, business, as well as the economy, government statistics, and information related to health, transportation, education, etc. But it doesn't ask questions about religion. So there's no official government count of the actual amount of Muslims that live in America. However, we do have a pretty good estimate based on the latest data that's available. The Pew Research Group, who's a private, non-profit organization, they're very reputable. Based on their data that they collected, they estimate that there's 3.45 million Muslims that live in America. And this is based on the data from the year 2017. We haven't fully gotten the 2018 data in yet, but based on this data, we see that Muslims make up 1.1% of the entire American population. So not that big at all. However, despite Muslims being a tiny drop in the overall population of the United States of America, we do see that Islam is growing and fast. Of course, Muslims in the United States aren't as large as other religious groups like Christians as well as Jews, yet projections suggest that in the United States, the Muslim population will grow much faster than the American Jewish population. And by the year 2040, Muslims will surpass Jews and become America's second largest religious group, next to, of course, Christianity. They also estimate that by the year 2050, the US Muslim population is projected to reach 8.1 million, or 2.1% of the nation's total population. And now this is almost double what it is today. So why is it that in the next 30 years, Islam is going to double in population in America? Two biggest factors, according to Pew Research Group, of course, one is immigration. The latest numbers indicate that there were a total of 38,901 Muslims that migrated to the US in the year 2016. And that's actually 46% of the entire amount of people who immigrated to the US that year. So almost 50% of those people that immigrated were Muslim. Immigration plays such a big part in the growth of Islam in the United States because 3/4 of Muslims in America are immigrants or the children of immigrants. Now there is another factor contributing to the growth of Islam in the United States, and that is the fertility rate. On average, the Muslim population is younger than other religious groups, so that means the fertility rates are of course going to be higher, more time to make babies, and they're having more babies. Now one thing you gotta note that Islam in the United States is very new. Muslims since the year 1965 1945 have arrived in the United States for three main reasons. And those three main reasons are, well, they were seeking refuge from the conditions in their homeland, as well as they're pursuing education. Third main reason, and this is the one that's getting a lot of the debates going in America, and that is that these immigrants want to advance the teachings and culture and customs of Islam into the United States. Although this number is a very small percentage of Muslims migrating to America, it's still a big topic of concern, especially with the Republican Party being in power in America, because 71% of the people who identify as Republicans agreed that they don't believe Islam is compatible with American values, and that's compared to an overall 42%. 60% also agreed with the idea that Muslim Americans weren't as patriotic as non-Muslim Americans, and this number was compared to 38% overall. As well as 56% of Republicans surveyed, they said that they'd be concerned if a mosque or some sort of Islamic center was built in their neighborhood, and this was compared to 33% overall. Now, even though the Muslim population is set to double in America in the next few decades, it's still gonna make up a small fraction of the population of America, especially when you compare it to Christianity. This is how the numbers look for the Christian growth compared to the Muslim growth. In the year 2020, it's estimated that the Christian population will be 252,970,000, which is almost 70 times the projected Muslim population. Now, in the year 2050, the projected Christian population will be 261,960,000. So as you can see, yes, the numbers are really large. But because of the growth of Islam and other religious groups, the percentage of the Christian population is actually on a decline. But still, even if Islam becomes the second largest religion at that time, that's only going to be like 2.1%. That's still nowhere near Christianity, although it's at a decline. But that's the big thing to notice. Christianity is decreasing, Islam is increasing, but there's also another group that really goes overlooked, and that is the people who are unaffiliated with any form of religion. It's estimated that in the year 2020, there will be projected 62,310,000 Americans who are not affiliated with any sort of religion. By the year 2050, the number is expected to grow to 100,860,000. So to summarize, the Muslim population in America is going to continue to grow, and in less than just a few short decades, it's going to be the second largest religion in America. But since, yes, Islam is very new in America, it's starting really from the bottom, but who knows how the religious makeup of America is going to look in the next 100, 200 years from now. Because in America, it's a lot different than places in Europe where a lot of people are converting to Islam, and although it does make up a small percentage of the population of Islam, we still don't really see that as much in America. It's estimated that 1 in 5 adult American Muslims were raised in a different religion and converted to Islam, and about the same number who were raised as Muslim no longer identify as Muslim. So you see, it's not really a factor impacting the growth of Islam in America. So that's your breakdown on how Islam is taking over America in terms of its population. It's likely that it won't happen in our lifetime, but based on these numbers, statistics show that it is growing. And the largest religion, Christianity, is at a decline in America. At number 10, we have the Netherlands, 855,000, 5%. Now, the Netherlands has a long history with the religion of Islam. The Netherlands has a rough population of around 17.1 million, out of which 5% are Muslims. The majority of Dutch Muslims have their roots in the countries of Turkey as well as Morocco. The Muslim population in the Netherlands increased after the Second World War. The Muslim community of the Netherlands includes people from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, as well as Somalia. Most Dutch Muslims are from the sect of Sunni, and around 80% of Turkic Dutch Muslims are Sunni, and 85% of Moroccan Dutch Muslims are Sunni. Religiosity differs from person to person and from community to community. Some Muslims in the Netherlands, they have never visited mosques before, and some visit the mosques weekly, while others do their religious activities every single day. Now moving on to the country at number 9, France, 3.35 million, 5%. Concrete data is very challenging to come by because the French Republic considers ethnic and religious affiliation to be a very private matter. Now France has approximately 3.35 million Muslim residents, and almost half of the Muslim population is under the age of 24 years old. Now the Muslim population in France come from various different parts of the world, like from North Africa, Algeria, and Morocco. And the greatest number of Muslims actually came to France in the contemporary era in the wake of the colonial wars of independence. From there, the country at number 8 is Bulgaria. 690,000, 7.8%. Now, Islam in Bulgaria is a minority religion and the second largest religion after Christianity. According to the 2011 census, there were 577,139 Muslims in Bulgaria, accounting for 7.8% of the population. But then from there, Muslims now account for 15% of the population, according to a later 2017 estimate, where 690,000 Muslims are in the country. Muslims in Bulgaria are Turks, Bulgarians, and Roma who live primarily in northeastern Bulgaria and the Rhodope Mountains. The country of Georgia comes in at number 7, 397,000, 10.7%. Although the country's official promoted national identity is closely associated with Christianity, while around 10.7% of the total population of Georgia is Muslim. There are 3 communities of Muslims in Georgia. Georgia's Azeris, Muslims in Adjara, as well as Kists. Georgia's Azeris are the largest Muslim community, which primarily consists of Shias, and Muslims of Adjara, Georgia, are estimated to be around 120,000, which makes up over 30% of its Muslim population. The rest of the people are Christians. The country of Montenegro comes in at number 6, 130,000, 20%. Muslims in Montenegro form the largest minority religion in the country. Muslims in the country are around 130,000, making up 20% of the total population of the country. The Muslims in the country are divided into 3 main groups: Bosniaks who speak Bosnian, Muslims by nationality who prefer Serbian, Montenegrins who speak Montenegrin, as well as ethnic Albanians who are all Slavic Muslims. Albanians are a distinct ethnic group who speak their language Albanian and live primarily in the southeast, where they constitute the vast majority of the population. Number 5 leads us to the country of Russia, 14 million, 30%. The country's Grand Mufti, Raul Gayuddin, said that the Muslim population in Russia has been growing with every passing day. He said that in 15 years, 30% of the total population of Russia would be Muslim. Now, the number of people performing prayers during Islamic festivals has increased compared to the previous years. Now, there has also been an increase in the number of mosques in Russia. Now, the increase in population is primarily due to 2 factors: a high birth rate among Muslim families and the arrival of people from Central Asia. So who knows, Russia in the future might have a much more massive Muslim population at the rate it's going right now. Let's look at country number 4, Republic of Macedonia, 687,000, 33.33%. Around 33.33% of the population is Muslim, and Macedonian Muslims' culture and history, they have contributed to their position within Macedonian society. Despite Macedonia's reputation for secularism and the separation of state and religion, well, its constitution recognizes Islam as equal to other religions. The establishment of Association of Macedonian Muslims, also known as Dar al-Ifta, was critical in preserving the position of Islam, as well as its legal manifestations and practices in the country. Bosnia and Herzegovina come in at number 3, 1.8 million, 51%. So yes, around 51% of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina identify as Muslim. Bosnia and Herzegovina is predominantly ethno-religious, with ethnicity determining religious affiliation. Most Muslims are Bosniaks, and the majority of them are Orthodox Christians. So yeah, around 51% of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina identifies Muslim. Bosnia and Herzegovina is predominantly ethno-religious, meaning that ethnicity really determines religious affiliation. So check it out. Most Muslims are Bosniaks, and the majority of Orthodox Christians are Bosnian Serbs, and the majority of Catholic Christians are Bosnian Croats. Now, it is extremely rare for someone to convert to a different religion, and children of inter-ethnic marriages, on the other hand, are frequently non-religious. Muslims and Christians, they have coexisted for years in this country, and it doesn't look like that's going to be changing anytime soon. From there, let's look at country number 2, Albania. 1.7 million, 80%. At one point, Muslims made up 80% of the Muslim. Well, that number is closer to 60% because at one point, and actually that 80% is probably closer to 60% because at one point, Muslims made up as much as 80% of the total population. That number now is estimated to be closer to 60%. Again, statistics are never 100%, they're just estimates. But either way, Islam arrived in Albania primarily during the Ottoman period, when most Albanians converted to Islam over time. And throughout the 20th century, democratic as well as other various different governments and powers in place, they pursued a systematic de-religionization of the Albanian nation and culture. And as a result of this, Islam, like all other faiths in the country, underwent huge transformations. The post-communist period, as well as the removal of legal and other government restrictions on religion, enabled Islam in the end to sort of resurrect. And finally, at number 1, we have the country of Kosovo. 1.9 million, 96%. So yes, this is a standing percentage. Kosovo is where 96% of its 2 million residents are Muslim, and it's remained like this for quite a while actually. Although it does remain a Western and largely pro-American country where bars coexist with mosques. However, there are signs that conservative Islam is growing in the country. Following the war in 1999, there were approximately 200 mosques, and there are now more than 800 mosques. Every month, a new mosque is built pretty much, and more women walk the streets of the country wearing black, fully covered Islamic attire, and also men are seen with untrimmed beards, and calf-length trousers are more common now, and these are identifying marks of conservative Muslims. Alright, we begin this episode off at number 10, Dawah. During ancient times, Muslims used dawah, or inviting others to engage with the message of Islam. Prophet Muhammad, he preached to people individually, but as most of Makkah belonged to the elite class, they saw the message as a threat to their political, religious, and social and economic status in Makkah. However, despite the hostile position of the Maccan leaders, the message of Islam gradually attracted not only the weak and poor of Makkah, but many of the elite people themselves. After that, Prophet Muhammad began preaching the message and teaching the Quran, which made the religion spread. Islam also spread through Sufism. Sufism contributed to the Islamization not only in Central Asia, but also in Kashmir, a disputed territory in the Himalayas foothills with population of upwards of 95% Muslim. Sufism came during the period of the Fatimid Caliphate, and the Sufis started preaching Islam from the time of the Delhi Sultanate to the Mughal era in the Indian subcontinent. Sachal Sarmas, Baba Bule Shah, Shah Wali Ullah, and Data Ganj Baksh are some of the prominent Sufis who helped align the local values and the practices with Islamic teachings. Next, at number 8, we're going to be looking at the spread of Islam throughout Asia. Islamic groups maintained control of most Asian land for a long period of time. Arab Muslims spread Islam into Turkish and Persian kingdoms, which then expanded into Central Asia. In Central Asia, Islam gradually spread as cultures and ethnic groups mixed together. And now today, when we look, most of Central Asian nations are actually Islamic nations now. Muslims conquered part of South Asia from India to Bangladesh and began the Delhi Sultanate. Now in the year 1526, the Mughal Empire descended from the Mongolians, expanded the Muslim territory, and filled the southern Asian land with Muslim art and architecture. From there, let's talk about the spread in Indonesia and China. Most of Indonesia converted to Islam under the influence of the Sufis in the 13th century. Islam also spread through merchant activities by Arab Muslim traders and adoption by local rulers. And today, Indonesia has the highest Muslim population in the entire world. And that comes as a surprise to a lot of people because most people think that most Muslims are in Arab countries, but that's actually not the case. Either way, Islam reached China also during the Tang and Song dynasties from 618 to 1279 via the overland and the maritime Silk Roads. Arabian and Persian traders built tombs and mosques combining traditional Arab and Chinese architectures, intermarried with local Chinese, and also raised the first generation of Chinese-speaking Muslims. However, only 2% of China's population is Muslim today. Alright, for number 6, let's look at the spread of Islam in Africa. Islam entered Africa from different places. First, Arab traders came from Asia into North Africa and moved through the Sahara to West Africa. The first African converts to Islam were merchants in Sudan, followed by some kings and their royal courts. However, the peasants initially maintained their local faiths and converted after some time to Islam. Gao was the first place where the king of Ghana converted, and then Muslims established a kingdom in Mali from the 13th century to the 15th century. Mansa Musa was the king of Mali, and he built the capital city called Timbuktu, where Muslim scholars taught and wrote Islamic law. For fact number 5, I gotta mention Ibn Battuta. Cities developed in the places where African traders met Arab traders, and as the towns grew, the Muslims started building mosques to give the cities some shape. Now, the records about the spread came from Arab sources, such as the great Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, who traveled from Western Africa to Eastern China throughout his life, probably more than Marco Polo or any other explorer at that time. Now, let's look at the rise of Islam over in Europe. Islam expanded in the Caucasus through the Muslim conquest of Persia in the 7th century and entered southern Europe through the expansion of the Umayyad conquest of Hispania in the 8th to 10th centuries. Muslim political entities, they existed firmly in what is today Spain, Portugal, Sicily, and Malta during the Middle Ages. And the Ottoman Empire, they further expanded into southeastern Europe, and it consolidated its political power by invading and conquering huge portions of the Serbian Empire, the Bulgarian Empire, as well as all of the remaining territories of the Byzantine Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. Many Muslims also migrated to Western Europe in the late 20th century, as well as the early 21st century. And that actually leads us to number 3, migration. Migration, both forced and voluntary, has played an important role in the spread of Islam. The earliest presence of Muslims outside of Arabia was a group of Muslims who sought refuge in Abyssinia during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad. This is one of the very famous stories about the life of Prophet Muhammad. Similarly, forced migration brought the first Muslims to the New World through the transatlantic slave trade, laying the foundations for an early Muslim presence in the Americas. The forced migrants became distant from Islam, but then they returned to mainstream Islam en masse, starting in the late 1970s. Also, intermarriage between Muslims and non-Muslims also became a source of the spread of Islam in different parts of the world. One prominent case was that of Sarah, the daughter of Alamund of the Visigothic royal family. Now, she was married twice to prominent Muslims, and in later centuries her descendants formed some of the leading Muslim families of Seville, including the Banu Hajjaj and the Banu Maslama. Similar marriages happened in the Ottoman Empire and in India and also the United States, where Muslims married non-Muslims, and it gave rise to Islam in various different regions. Now we end this episode off with number 1, conquests. Islam spread through the reign of the second Caliph Umar, who held power from 634 to 644. And the Rashidun Caliphate constructed a massive empire out of many swift military victories and gave rise to people embracing the religion of Islam. After the Rashidun, the Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasid dynasty helped increase the conversion to Islam. The Umayyads did not actively encourage conversion, but when the Abbasids rebelled and gained control, Islamic art and culture started to flourish in the land, and they are famous for initiating the Islamic Golden Age.